Hello, so this is the first of 4 recordings that focus on profit maximisation and market equilibrium. And what I'm going to talk you through first is the different market structures. So if we think about a commercial business, so maybe a commercial event management company that operates in hotels and has conference facilities. Their commercial objectives are typically to maximise the profit made. They also want to maximise the market share for the products. They want to make sure that their hotel chain is actually taking, maximising the share of bookings for conference facilities, and they want to maximise the total revenues. Now, I have to say that I've put these as commercial objectives, but also even in the voluntary third sector and the public sector, to some extent, they also want to try to do these sorts of things too, because they need to actually, be able to break even when they're running an event. So we want to look at how a business maximises profit, and we'll go through this in a number of recordings. But first of all, I want to talk to you about the different forms of market competition. So depending on the nature of the organisation, you may or may not have much ability to control price and the quantity that's demanded. And a lot of this depends on, first of all, whether you're a price taker. So a price taker is businesses which are generally very small, and they have little influence on the market around them. They're selling quite a homogeneous product, and there's lots of competition. I'll show you some examples in a moment. And then at the other end, you've got a price maker. So this is a business that offers something unique, and therefore, to some extent, it can choose the price it charges. So what we're going to do is look through these 4 different market structures, and these depend. The way they operate depends to some extent on whether there's many competing firms, whether it's very easy to actually set up and start operating in that particular area, whether they're doing something very unique in terms of their event offering, or whether they're doing something which is what we call homogeneous. It's very similar. A lot of people are offering something similar. So, down there I've said, a question, are any of the following unique or one of many? So let's just talk this through with you. First of all, you've got things like Glastonbury Festival. Well, Glastonbury Festival, it is unique in many respects, but also it is one of many festivals that operate in the UK during the summer. So it's a multi-day festival. And in fact, of course, there's many now in Europe and other parts of the world. So it is one of many, but it has some unique features. So it's never quite as straightforward as you think. Then you've got the Big Centre in Bournemouth. So the Big Centre is basically a conference exhibition, concert venue in Bournemouth. And actually lots of seaside towns, and actually many other towns and cities, have very similar kinds of venues that can offer facilities for very large scale events. So, there are quite a few competitors, scattered around the country. And then the New Forest Show. So the New Forest Show is an agricultural show that's held annually, not far from Bournemouth. But of course, there are many agricultural shows around the country, but it's relatively unique for the area. And then a hotel wedding venue. Well, many hotels are wedding venues, so there are a lot of competitors, but of course there could be some unique features. So I'm now going to try to take you through these different market structures that you can see there on the left-hand side. So first of all, we'll look at perfect competition. So this is where we typically have many firms. It's quite easy to get into the industry, and the firms on the whole roughly produce more or less identical product. So this is where all the firms are price takers. They have limited choice about the price they set. So a good example from the event sector there would be meetings rooms in London. And in fact, there are companies now set up that enable you to sort of book and choose these rather than going direct to the meeting rooms themselves. And lots of different organisations who've got spare capacity in their office offer meeting rooms in London because it's a complete easy place to meet. But basically, these are price takers. It's pretty much identical in terms of what they're offering. So, there's limited opportunity to set differential prices, except for maybe on the basis of location, those being better located than others in terms of people getting to them, and maybe they have other, added unique features, but it's limited. Another example, of course, I've got the big chains here, but actually is the fast food outlets near an events venue, where, essentially they're all offering something fairly similar at a fairly similar price. So I think you begin to kind of get the idea there that there's just not so much differentiation between these sorts of products or services. And then we have monopolistic competition. This is where there are quite a lot of firms. It's freedom of entry into the market. There is some differentiation within the product, and so the companies do have some degree of control over the price, but basically the price is set on how people value it. Now, this is actually a structure which you see quite a lot in the events sector. Now, I've given the example of nightclubs in Bournemouth, and apologies, I think I took this screenshot a year ago, so I'm not actually sure that some of these clubs still exist, but you can see that Bournemouth has a lot of nightclubs. In fact, it used to have the most nightclubs per head of population in the UK. I'm not sure if that's in fact still the case. But they are all competing with each other. It's relatively easy to get into that market, but they will do slightly different things. Some of them might target the lower end of the market. Some of them might target a slightly higher price market. But they will differentiate themselves to some extent from each other. And then if we look at oligopoly, this is where there's relatively few firms, because it may be that it's quite difficult to get into that particular market, and generally they set their prices relative to the rivals, so they refer to this idea of mutual interdependence. Now, I actually couldn't really think of a good event example here, so probably the easiest way to explain this is through the supermarkets. So supermarkets like Tesco's, Sainsbury's, Lidl, etc., they have this kind of market structure, and to some extent they have to set their prices that are relative to one another. And clearly, some supermarkets might, say that they are offering something a bit more premium, like Waitrose, but generally speaking, they have to reflect the prices of their rivals. Otherwise, basically, people would stop shopping at them and go to the rival supermarket. So, and there are some differences. Lidl and Aldi don't have a full product range, for example. And obviously you don't have so much help with things like, at the checkouts. So, there are sort of differences there, but essentially this is an oligopoly. And then lastly, we have monopoly. Now, there's not that many examples in the events field, but there are some. And this is basically where there's only one firm in that industry. And this is what we call the price maker. So that, that a company that's doing something very unique, they can, set the price, as they choose, really. Now, obviously, I've said there are limits to the price that can be charged, because at some point, customers will sort of say, actually, you're doing something very unique, but, we actually really can't afford to pay this. So I've given an example there of Clarion Events. Now, Clarion Events are a big events company who actually do a range of different kinds of events, but one of the areas they specialise in is defence and security events, where they're doing large exhibitions where companies who produce defence stuff, weapons, I don't know really, security systems, they exhibit those, and they target, for instance, international governments, but also companies who need to actually have security systems, that sort of thing. So they're offering something relatively unique. And that's an example there, where they may be, a price maker. And I've got another example above there. I said unique suppliers to event sectors. So there may be a company, which is the only one that produces something which is, quite specifically needed by certain events, and they would also be a monopoly there. So hopefully that's given you an overview of these different kinds of structures that you'll find. And you will now need to listen to, there's 3 other sets of recordings that focus on this particular topic area on profit maximisation and market equilibrium.